The sky above Earth shimmered as the alien ship broke through the atmosphere. It was massive, dark, and silent, moving like a ghost. The people on the ground watched with wide eyes, some in fear, others in awe. The world had seen alien visitors before, but never like this. Inside a top-secret military base, Captain Elias Carter stood with his arms crossed, waiting. His sharp blue eyes were fixed on the landing zone, where the alien craft was touching down. Around him, soldiers gripped their weapons nervously, but Carter raised a hand. "Stand down," he ordered. "If they wanted us dead, we'd already be gone." The ship's ramp lowered with a loud hiss. Out of the shadows stepped Commander Vezkor, a towering warrior of the Xeric race. His armor was scratched and dented, telling stories of countless battles. His 4 arms held something long and heavy, a massive jagged sword that gleamed under the artificial lights. The Xeric were not Earth's enemies. They were survivors. Their empire had crumbled under the onslaught of the Drakesh swarm, a species that consumed everything in its path. And now, Vezkor stood here, bringing a gift or a challenge. Carter took a step forward, keeping his expression neutral. "Commander Vezkor," he said, "you didn't come all this way just to show off your sword." The alien warrior's glowing red eyes studied Carter for a moment before he spoke. His deep voice rumbled like distant thunder. "This blade," Vezkor said, raising it slightly, "was forged in the fires of my homeworld. It has slain thousands of my people's enemies. It carries the rage of war and the sorrow of the fallen." Carter frowned. He had seen alien weapons before, but something about this one felt different. The metal pulsed faintly, almost like it was alive. Vezkor took a step closer and thrust the sword forward. "I ask of you, human," he said, "forge this into armor. A defense greater than any weapon. I bring you death, so you may turn it into life." Silence filled the air. Soldiers shifted uneasily, exchanging glances. Carter, however, held the alien's gaze. He could see the weight of history in Vezkor's eyes, the burden of a warrior who had lost too much. "You think human hands can do what Xeric ones could not?" Carter asked. Vezkor nodded slowly. "Your kind is different. You adapt. You endure. We fought the swarm for centuries, and still we fell. But your people have faced impossible wars, and you still stand. If anyone can turn destruction into salvation, it is humanity." Carter let out a slow breath and looked at the sword again. It was a monster of a weapon, one that had spilled oceans of blood. Could he really reshape it into something that protected instead of destroyed? A part of him wanted to refuse. He was a weapons engineer, not a miracle worker. But another part of him, the part that had seen war, that had fought tooth and nail for survival, knew that Vezkor was right. Humanity didn't give up. It found a way. Carter reached out and gripped the sword's handle. The moment his fingers touched the metal, a strange sensation crawled up his arm, like the blade was feeling him, testing him. The metal pulsed again, and suddenly, Carter saw flashes in his mind, visions of battle, planets burned to ash, warriors screaming as they fell beneath the swarm's claws. Then it was gone. The base's cold air returned, and Carter found himself breathing heavily. He tightened his grip on the blade and looked up at Vezkor. "I'll do it," he said. A slow, respectful nod was the alien warrior's only response. Carter turned to his team. "Get this to the forge. Now." As the soldiers moved to carry the sword inside, Vezkor spoke once more. "Do not fail, human," he said quietly. "Because if you do, there will be nothing left of your world to protect." Carter clenched his jaw, but didn't respond. He already knew what was at stake, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of destiny pressing down on his shoulders. Humanity had been given a blade of war. Now, it was up to them to turn it into a shield. The forge room was alive with activity as Captain Elias Carter and his team worked to unlock the mystery of the alien sword. The air was thick with the heat from the furnaces, and the rhythmic sounds of hammer strikes echoed off the walls. Carter stood at the center of it all, focused on the task at hand. His eyes were fixed on the massive blade, which lay on a tab, low, glowing faintly under the dim lights. Vescor's sword was unlike anything Carter had ever seen before. It was not made of any metal found on Earth. The blade shimmered, shifting between colors that didn't belong to any known spectrum. As Carter leaned closer, he felt a strange hum vibrate in his bones. It was as though the blade was alive. "Is it alive?" Lieutenant Mara Whitfield asked, her voice filled with curiosity. She was standing beside Carter, examining the sword through the thick gloves of her protective gear. "I don't know," Carter muttered, "but it sure feels like it." Mara carefully placed a small tool next to the blade, testing the metal's reaction. Almost immediately, the tool vibrated and jerked away. "It's resisting everything we try to use on it," she said. "We need a new approach." Carter stepped back and rubbed his chin thoughtfully. He had worked with many metals over his career, some rare, some dangerous, but nothing like this. The metal was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Every time they tried to cut it, melt it, or even analyze it, the blade fought back. "I think we need to stop treating it like a regular weapon," Carter said, his voice low but determined. "This sword, it's more than just a tool. It's a part of something bigger. Maybe it's not just metal. It could be something alive, or something that remembers." Mara raised an eyebrow. "Remembers? Think about it," Carter continued. "The sword has been used for centuries. It's been through countless battles, seen victories and defeats. Maybe it has a memory of what it's been through. And maybe that's why it's reacting like this." Before Mara could reply, the rest of the team gathered around, eager to contribute to the discussion. As they examined the sword, they noticed something strange. The longer they worked with it, the more it seemed to adjust itself to the presence of humans. The blade no longer fought against them. Instead, it seemed to welcome their touch. Carter's eyes widened as he made an unexpected discovery. The metal of the sword was growing softer. It wasn't losing its strength, but the surface was now responding to his movements in a way that suggested it was changing. "Look at this," Carter said, tapping his fingers lightly on the sword's edge. To his surprise, the blade vibrated in response. A low hum filled the room as the sword's energy seemed to surge. "It's alive," Mara whispered, stepping back in awe. "The metal, it's reacting to us." Carter turned to face the team, his mind racing. "We've been approaching this all wrong. The sword doesn't just want to be forged into something else. It wants to be understood. It's not an object we can simply shape. It's a living thing with purpose." Vescor's words echoed in Carter's mind. Forge this into armor. The Zirek commander had never asked them to simply melt the blade down and create a shield. He had asked for something more, something that would preserve the sword's legacy, its strength, and its purpose. Suddenly, an idea clicked in Carter's mind. What if we don't destroy the sword's form, but enhance it? We don't need to take its power away. We need to channel it. Mara and the others exchanged looks. Channel it? How? "I think I know," Carter said, his voice growing more confident. "What if we use the resonance method?" "The resonance method," Lieutenant Whitfield repeated. "Isn't that only used for vibrational metals? The kind that can be shaped with sound waves?" "Exactly," Carter replied. "The sword's metal reacts to sound, to energy. It's been absorbing the vibrations of battle for centuries. What if we use that to guide it?" With newfound determination, the team set to work. They carefully placed the sword in a resonance chamber, a piece of equipment usually used for shaping materials like quartz or rare alloys. The chamber was designed to use high-frequency sound waves to shape and mold materials without the need for direct heat. As the chamber hummed to life, the sword responded. The metal began to vibrate, resonating with the frequencies emitted by the chamber. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the blade began to change shape, its jagged edges smoothing. its surface becoming even more refined. Carter watched in awe as the sword seemed to breathe. The energy from the chamber flowed through the blade, and the metal began to rearrange itself, adapting to the frequencies it had been exposed to. It was as if the sword was alive, not just in the physical sense, but in its very essence. "This is it," Carter whispered. "It's starting to come together. The sword is becoming something more, something greater than it was before." As the hours passed, the blade continued to change. It was no longer just a weapon. It was evolving into something else entirely. The transformation wasn't just physical. The sword seemed to be growing more connected to humanity with every passing moment. When the process was finally complete, the sword no longer lay on the table as it had before. It had turned into something else, something that pulsed with energy, its surface shimmering with power. It had been forged into something new. Carter looked at the team. "We're ready." But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. What they had created was more than armor. It was the first step in humanity's fight for survival. And it was clear now that the sword had more to offer than just protection. It had brought them here for a reason. The hum of the forge had changed. It was no longer the usual steady rhythm of hammer strikes and sparks. Now, it was a gentle buzz, a deep resonance that filled the room with a strange energy. Captain Elias Carter stood in front of the newly transformed sword, now in armor, and stared at it in awe. The metal had taken on a sleek, reflective surface, as if it had absorbed the very essence of the forge itself. Is this really possible?" Lieutenant Mara Whitfield asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. She reached out to touch the armor, but hesitated, as if the metal might react in a way they hadn't anticipated. Carter nodded slowly. "It's real. We've created something. Alive." His eyes were filled with determination, but there was a trace of doubt, too. The sword had evolved into more than just a weapon. It had become an artifact of untapped potential, but whether it could truly be turned into something to protect humanity remained uncertain. The room was quiet, save for the steady hum of the equipment. Carter stepped forward and carefully examined the armor. It was light, almost weightless, and yet it radiated power. The once jagged, uneven surface of the blade had smoothed into a seamless form that now looked almost like a living shield. The black metallic surface shimmered in the light, the patterns shifting, as though the metal itself had taken on the scars of battle and was ready to continue the fight. "You think it's ready?" Mara asked, crossing her arms. "I don't know," Carter replied, "but we have to test it. It won't do any good if we don't know how it reacts under pressure." Vescor's words echoed in Carter's mind. Forge it into armor. He wasn't sure how long it would take before Earth was attacked again. They had to be ready. They had one shot. Carter turned to his team, giving each of them a purposeful glance. "Get the simulation chamber ready. We need to push it to its limits. Whatever happens, we learn from it." The simulation chamber was designed to test the durability of new technology under extreme conditions. The team had used it to test everything from advanced weapons to experimental materials, but nothing had ever been tested like this before. They were about to throw fire at something they didn't fully understand. As the team began to prepare the chamber, Carter stood over the armor, his hand resting lightly on its surface. He could feel the pulse of energy flowing from the metal, like a heartbeat. It wasn't just a tool anymore. It was something alive, and in a way, it was connected to him, connected to all of humanity. The sound of machinery whirring to life pulled him from his thoughts. Mara was at the control panel, adjusting settings for the test. "All systems are go," she said. "Ready when you are." Carter nodded and stepped back as one of the soldiers, a young man named Private Adam Hughes, approached the armor. Adam was tall and strong, a natural fit for the suit. The team had already prepared the armor, and now it was time to see if it could fit a human. Adam slid into the armor without difficulty, the metal fitting snugly around his body. It was as if the armor was alive, adjusting itself to the contours of his form, protecting him without feeling heavy or restrictive. The hum of the metal seemed to settle, almost as though it was recognizing its wearer. "All right," Adam said, his voice muffled through the suit's communication system. "Let's see what this thing can do." Carter gave a nod of approval and motioned for Mara to begin the simulation. She pressed a button, and the chamber doors sealed shut with a loud clang. The room darkened, and suddenly, blinding lights flickered on. The floor shifted, and massive projectiles, glowing disks of energy, shot toward Adam from all directions. He barely had time to react. The first blast hit the armor with a resounding crack, but instead of breaking through, the energy seemed to be absorbed by the metal. The suit flared for a split second, the energy dancing along its surface before dissipating harmlessly. Adam stood tall, unharmed. His breathing remained steady inside the suit. "Looks like it's holding up," Mara said, her voice filled with relief. But Carter wasn't convinced yet. "Keep it going. Push it harder." The simulation chamber shifted again, this time sending massive energy beams crashing down on Adam. The beams hit with such force that the sound alone shook the walls. But with every impact, the armor absorbed the energy, and the force of each blow seemed to redirect itself, sending ripples of energy out across the suit's surface. Adam stumbled for a moment, but quickly regained his footing. The suit wasn't just durable, it was adaptable. The more the energy changed, the more the armor adjusted, its surface shifting and moving to protect its wearer. "You see that?" Carter said, excitement building in his voice. "It's responding to the energy, adapting in real time. This isn't just armor, it's an intelligent defense system." The simulation didn't stop. It continued, throwing more obstacles, more weapons, and more tests at the armor. Adam, despite the constant onslaught, was unharmed. The suit was flawless, unbreakable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the simulation came to an end. The lights in the chamber flickered back on, and the doors slowly opened. Adam stepped out of the armor, his face flushed with excitement. That was incredible. I've never felt anything like it. It's like the suit understands me. Carter approached the armor, inspecting it closely. The surface was unmarred, still shimmering with power. He could hardly believe it. What they had created was far beyond anything they had hoped for. "This is only the beginning," Carter said, a smile tugging at his lips. "If we can keep refining this, it'll change everything." Mara stood beside him, looking at the armor with a mixture of awe and respect. It could save humanity. Carter turned to face her, his expression serious. "It has to. We don't know when the swarm will arrive, but we'll be ready. This armor, it's our chance to survive." The days following the armor test were filled with preparation. The once secret base had transformed into a hub of activity. The newly forged armor was no longer just an experiment. It was humanity's hope for survival. The scientists worked day and night, improving the suit's design, making sure it was ready for the battle that was surely coming. Captain Elias Carter and his team knew that time was running out. Every hour they worked, the anxiety grew. They weren't just racing against time. They were racing against an enemy that had already wiped out entire worlds. The Drakesh swarm was out there, moving across the stars, leaving nothing but dust in their wake. If they didn't act soon, Earth could become their next target. Carter sat in his office, staring at the map of the galaxy on his screen. The swarm's movements were unpredictable, but their path seemed to be heading straight toward Earth. The intelligence reports were clear. If they didn't make a move soon, they would be caught off guard. Mara Whitfield stood at the doorway, knocking lightly before entering. She had a folder in her hands, her expression serious. "Carter," she said, setting the folder on his desk. "We've just received a message from Vezkor. He's urgent." Carter's heart skipped a beat. Vezkor had been their ally, but the Zirek commander had always been one to act without warning. If he was reaching out now, it could only mean one thing: danger. Carter opened the folder, reading the message aloud. "The swarm approaches. We have no time. Prepare your forces. Mara frowned. That's it. No details. Carter's eyes narrowed. Veskor isn't one for small talk. When he says prepare, he means it. Just then, a loud alarm rang out, shaking the entire base. The walls vibrated as if the ground itself was trembling. What's happening? Mara shouted over the noise. Carter grabbed the comms. Status, he demanded. A voice crackled through the speakers. Captain, we've detected a fleet of unknown ships entering Earth's atmosphere. They're too large to be anything we've encountered before. Carter's blood ran cold. The swarm. They had arrived. We need to mobilize, now. Carter ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Get everyone to the armory. We'll fight back with everything we've got. Mara turned, her face set with determination. What about the armor? It's not finished yet. Carter hesitated. They knew the armor was still in its early stages. It was powerful, but it wasn't perfect. However, it was their only chance. We deploy what we have. It's the best we've got. As the alarms blared, the base shifted into combat mode. Soldiers rushed to their stations, preparing the new armor suits, loading weapons, and getting ready for the fight of their lives. Carter and Mara headed to the command center, where they could monitor the situation and make quick decisions. The screens in front of them filled with images of the sky above Earth. Dozens of massive ships loomed, their dark, metallic surfaces gleaming like monsters in the sky. They moved in perfect formation, a relentless swarm, preparing for their descent. They're here, Carter muttered. Do we know how many ships? Mara asked, her voice tight with concern. The technician at the console typed quickly, pulling up data. We estimate at least 30 ships. Some are significantly larger than anything we've seen. The swarm is different this time. They've evolved. Carter clenched his fists. How long until they're in range? 30 minutes, the technician replied. If we don't stop them before they land, they'll overrun our cities in no time. Carter felt the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. Humanity was outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. But they had something no enemy could ever predict: ingenuity. And now, they had the armor too. Mara stepped up beside him, her expression calm despite the looming threat. Captain, we got one chance to hit them hard. We need to deploy the armor and get as many soldiers into those suits as possible. We'll make them regret ever coming here. Carter nodded. Get to the armory. We'll need every suit we've got. I'll lead the first strike. Within minutes, the team was mobilized. The soldiers suited up in the new armor, the once foreign metal now a part of their very beings. Carter watched as each soldier stepped forward, their faces determined. They knew what they were up against, and they weren't backing down. Outside, the sky darkened as the ships descended, casting long shadows over the ground. The Drakesh swarm had arrived, and the battle for Earth had begun. Carter and his team moved quickly, taking position on the front lines. They could see the massive alien ships now, their dark silhouettes filling the horizon. The armor-clad soldiers stood in formation, waiting for the order to strike. Carter raised his hand, signaling for the first strike to begin. Move out. The ground shook as the soldiers advanced, their steps heavy but sure. The energy from the armor pulsed as they approached the enemy, and the air was thick with anticipation. It was now or never. The first shot rang out from the alien ships, a massive blast that shook the ground beneath them. But the armor absorbed the hit, the energy rippling harmlessly across the surface. Carter's heart raced. This was their test, their first real battle. The armor was holding, but the real fight was just beginning. Push forward, Carter shouted. Take them down. The soldiers surged forward, their weapons blazing. The battle for Earth had begun, and this time, humanity was not backing down. The armor had turned the tide. Now they would prove that they could fight, that they could win, and that they would survive. The battle had erupted in a frenzy. The Drakesh swarm had descended upon Earth, their massive ships tearing through the atmosphere like a storm of destruction. The sky was filled with flashes of light, the booming sounds of weapons, and the cries of soldiers fighting for survival. But amidst the chaos, Captain Elias Carter felt a strange calm within him. He had fought in countless battles, but this was different. This was humanity's last stand, and they had something the swarm didn't expect: the armor. Carter, fully suited in the advanced armor, led his team toward the enemy lines. The armor hummed as it absorbed the energy from the blasts, the strange metallic surface flickering with each impact. The soldiers around him moved in formation, their faces determined as they advanced on the enemy. The alien ships were enormous, each one easily 10 times the size of any human-made vessel. Their weapons fired bright, powerful beams that collided with the ground, leaving craters and explosions in their wake. But the armor worked, each blast that hit only served to strengthen the soldiers inside. The resonance method they had used to forge the armor allowed it to absorb and redirect energy, turning the swarm's own attacks back on them. As Carter advanced, he could see the first line of swarm soldiers emerging from the ships. They were tall, with dark exoskeletons that glinted under the sun. Their weapons were unlike anything humans had ever seen: massive cannons that fired waves of energy, and sharp-bladed weapons that could slice through anything. But Carter wasn't afraid. With the armor, his team had the advantage. He signaled for his squad to move in, and they began to fire back, their weapons lighting up the battlefield. The sound of gunfire was deafening, but it was the clash of the armor against the alien forces that truly marked the turning point. The soldiers of the swarm were fast and fierce, but they were not prepared for the resilience of the new armor. Every shot they fired was absorbed or deflected, and every strike was met with a shield of energy that kept the soldiers safe. Carter could see the alien soldiers faltering, their confidence shaking as the humans fought back with unyielding determination. "Stay focused," Carter shouted into his comms. "We need to push them back." His voice cut through the noise, and the soldiers responded, rallying together. The armor allowed them to move faster, to strike harder, and to hold their ground longer than they ever could have without it. They were no longer just humans. They were warriors, equipped with the strength of 1,000 battles, and they weren't going to let Earth fall. As the battle raged on, Mara Whitfield, who was coordinating from the command center, watched the live feed with growing hope. The humans were making progress. The swarm had expected an easy victory, but instead, they were facing a force that wouldn't back down. The armor had turned the tide, and Earth's forces were pushing the invaders back. But Mara knew this wasn't over. The swarm was relentless. They had more ships, more soldiers, and a strategy that they had perfected over countless worlds. It was only a matter of time before they adapted to the armor. "Carter," Mara's voice crackled over the comms. "The larger ships, those are the ones with the main weapons. We need to take them out before they can target our cities." Carter scanned the battlefield, his eyes narrowing as he saw the massive ships in the distance. They were huge, with weapons that could level entire cities in a single strike. He knew what had to be done. "We'll do it," Carter said, his voice steady. "All units, focus fire on the main ships. We take them down now, or this battle will be over before it starts." The soldiers of Earth shifted their focus, their weapons now targeting the larger alien ships. They fired in unison, their armor amplifying their power as they launched everything they had at the enemy. But the swarm ships were heavily armored, and their defenses held strong against the human assault. "Keep pushing. Don't stop," Carter ordered, his voice growing louder as he charged forward. His suit's energy surged, and he felt the power of the armor surge through him. He was unstoppable, and he knew the rest of his team was right behind him. In the distance, one of the large ships shuddered. A blast from a soldier's cannon had finally pierced its defenses. The ship's shields flickered and cracked, and for the first time since the battle began, the swarm's forces seemed to waver. Carter's eyes locked onto the ship. "That's it. We've got a breach. Fire at the weak points." The soldiers surged forward, their weapons blasting away at the exposed parts of the ship. The armor allowed them to get closer than ever before, protecting them as they moved in for the kill. Finally, with one final, concentrated effort, the massive ship exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The shockwave sent the surrounding swarm soldiers stumbling, and the remaining ships in the air hesitated. "We've done it." Mara's voice rang out through the comms. "One down. Keep going." The tide of the battle had shifted. The swarm was no longer the unstoppable force it had once seemed. Humanity had fought back, and now the enemy was starting to fall. But Carter knew this victory wasn't the end. The swarm was cunning, and they wouldn't stop until Earth was theirs. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, and more challenges ahead. But for the first time in this war, Carter allowed himself a small moment of hope. They were winning, and they weren't going to stop. The battle for Earth was far from over. The explosion of the first massive ship had sent shockwaves through the battlefield, but the Drakesh swarm had not been defeated. They were relentless, and their forces seemed endless. With every ship that fell, more appeared to take its place. Earth's forces, despite their new advantage with the armor, were still vastly outnumbered. Captain Elias Carter stood at the edge of the battlefield, his mind racing. The battle had raged for hours, and although they had made progress, the swarm had adapted quickly. They were learning. They were changing tactics, becoming more unpredictable with each attack. Carter knew they couldn't rely on just brute force to win this fight. They needed to outsmart the swarm. He turned to his team, who were scattered across the battlefield, each soldier wearing the powerful new armor. Despite their success so far, they looked exhausted. The constant barrage of attacks from the swarm's forces was wearing them down. The armor had protected them, but it wasn't invincible. They had to finish this, and fast. "Mara, report," Carter shouted into his comms. Mara's voice came through, steady but tinged with exhaustion. "We've made progress, Elias. The swarm is breaking into smaller groups now, but their larger ships are still coming in. They're about to launch their main assault. We don't have much time." Carter clenched his jaw. The time was running out. "We need a plan. Something big. We can't keep pushing them back forever," Mara replied. "We need to take out the central command ship. If we can hit their leader, it might throw the rest of them into disarray. But we'll need everything we've got to make it to the center of their forces." Carter's mind raced. They had already taken down so many ships, but the swarm still had a command vessel, a massive ship that controlled the entire fleet. If they could destroy it, the swarm would lose their coordination, but getting close enough to strike it was another challenge entirely. The ground shook as another blast tore through the air. Carter's heart sank. The battle was becoming a race against time. "Carter," Mara's voice broke through his thoughts. "I've got a team ready. We can make a direct assault on the command ship, but we'll need the armor to cover us. We can't get close without it." Carter turned to his team, who were still holding the line, firing at the advancing alien forces. "Listen up," he shouted. "We're going for the command ship. Everyone who can still move, get to the rendezvous point now. We make our move together, or we don't make it at all." The soldiers, despite their fatigue, responded with determination. They had already seen what the armor could do. They had seen the power they had when they fought as one. They weren't about to give up now. As they regrouped, Carter's mind focused on the plan ahead. The armor would be the key to their success. If they could get close enough to the command ship, they could use their combined firepower to disable its shields. But they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. One wrong move, and the entire mission would fail. They made their way toward the heart of the swarm's fleet, dodging incoming fire and taking cover behind the wreckage of destroyed ships. The armor protected them, but the sheer number of alien soldiers was overwhelming. Yet with every step, their resolve grew stronger. Carter's squad was on the front lines, with Mara's team close behind. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the swarm's defense lines, destroy the command ship, and end the battle. The swarm's forces were closing in, but the humans had one advantage: the armor. Each soldier moved with precision, their weapons cinched with the powerful suits they wore. They were a force to be reckoned with, their strength and speed unmatched. As they neared the command ship, Carter's heart pounded in his chest. He could see the massive vessel now, surrounded by a ring of smaller ships and swarming alien soldiers. The ship itself was surrounded by a barrier of energy, its shields glowing bright, as if daring anyone to approach. "This is it," Mara said, her voice coming through the comms. "We need to get through that shield and hit them hard. Once the shields are down, we take them out." Carter didn't hesitate. He motioned to his team. "Charge." The soldiers surged forward, their weapons raised, firing at the shield that protected the command ship. The energy from their guns collided with the barrier, but it barely made a dent. The shield was powerful, and time was running out. "Focus fire," Carter shouted. "Everyone, hit the weak points." They fired in unison, their weapons finding the gaps in the shield's defenses. Slowly, the shield began to flicker, weakening under the combined assault. But the swarm wasn't going down without a fight. Alien soldiers charged forward, their massive bladed weapons raised, ready to strike. Carter's team held their ground, fighting back with everything they had. The armor absorbed the hits, but the strain was beginning to show. They were running low on energy, and they needed to finish this now. With a final push, the shield around the command ship collapsed. The way was clear. "Now," Carter shouted. The soldiers rushed forward, their weapons blazing as they charged toward the heart of the swarm's fleet. They moved as one, each soldier covered by the armor, each shot fired with precision and strength. And then, with a mighty explosion, the command ship's central core was struck. It detonated in a brilliant burst of light, sending shockwaves through the entire battlefield. The swarm's forces faltered, their coordination breaking apart. Without their command ship, the rest of the fleet was lost. The soldiers stood in the aftermath, their breath heavy but victorious. The swarm had been defeated, for now. Carter looked around at his team. They had done it. They had saved Earth. The battle was won. But Carter knew this was only the beginning. The swarm would return, and humanity would be ready. They had proven that they could stand against the darkness of the universe. They had fought with everything they had. And they had won. The battlefield was eerily quiet. The once raging chaos had died down, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the hum of the armor. Carter stood among the wreckage of the swarm's forces, his eyes scanning the horizon. The victory was theirs, but there was no celebration, only a sense of relief mixed with the weight of what they had endured. The sky above Earth had darkened with the smoke of battle, but the distant glow of the sun still peeked through, offering a glimmer of hope. Humanity had faced the greatest threat it had ever known, and now it was time to rebuild. Carter's team gathered around him, their faces tired but proud. Mara approached, a small smile on her face, though her eyes were filled with concern. "We did it, Elias," she said softly. "We won." Carter nodded, though his expression was serious. "Yes, but it's not over. The swarm may be defeated for now, but they'll return. We need to be ready." Mara's smile faded as she looked up at the sky, the remnants of the alien ships still visible in the atmosphere. "I know, but today we've proven something. We've shown them that humanity won't back down. We've got the strength to fight, and we've got the courage to stand against anything that comes our way." Carter glanced at his team, who were now removing their helmets, revealing tired faces. They had been through so much. It had been a brutal fight, but they had stood strong together. The armor, which had seemed like a last-ditch effort, had turned the tide of the battle. It had given them the strength to fight back and the courage to stand firm in the face of impossible odds. But as Carter looked at the faces of his soldiers, he knew that the true power didn't come from the armor. It came from the people inside. The armor had amplified their strengths, but it was their resolve, their unity, and their will to survive that had carried them through. "We've proven we can fight," Carter said, his voice steady. "But we need to prepare for what's coming next. The swarm won't stop, and we can't afford to relax. We need to rebuild, to strengthen our defenses, and to be ready for whatever they throw at us." Mara nodded, her expression firm. "We will, and we'll do it together." The soldiers began to move toward the command center, their steps slower now, but still resolute. Carter stayed behind for a moment, looking out over the battlefield. The ground was littered with debris from the battle, the wreckage of alien ships, the twisted remains of fallen soldiers, and the marks of destruction left behind by the intense fighting. It was a reminder of the cost of victory. But there was hope, too. The ground was slowly beginning to heal. The battle had been won, and Earth was still standing. Carter's comms buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Mara again. "Elias, you need to see this." He hurried back to the command center, where Mara was already waiting. The screens around them flickered to life, showing images of the planet's surface. What caught Carter's attention was the sight of large groups of people, civilians, workers, engineers, gathering at the edge of the battle zone. They were beginning to rebuild. The image shifted, showing a large group of workers carefully approaching the wreckage of the command ship. The destroyed ship, once the heart of the swarm's invasion force, was now being examined for technology. Carter knew what this meant. It was a chance to learn from the enemy, to understand their tactics, and perhaps even to gain an advantage for the future. "This could change everything," Mara said, her voice filled with awe. "We've just been given the key to understanding their technology." Carter nodded. "We'll need to be careful. We don't know everything about the swarm's systems yet, but this is our chance to learn. We can use their technology against them next time." The soldiers who had fought in the battle, along with the engineers and scientists, were already making plans to extract whatever useful technology they could from the wreckage. It was clear now that the war was far from over. The swarm would return, but Earth was no longer unprepared. The victory had given them more than just time. It had given them the knowledge and the resolve to fight smarter. Carter looked at the screen one last time before turning back to his team. "This is just the beginning. We've won a battle, but the war is far from over. We'll be ready for them next time, and we'll keep fighting, together." As he spoke, the soldiers gathered around, their faces filled with determination. They had fought for Earth, for each other, and for a future they weren't willing to let go of. The battle had shown them the strength of humanity. It had shown them that even in the darkest of times, they had the ability to rise above. They had proven that when they fought as one, nothing could stand in their way. And now, with the dawn of a new day, they had the chance to rebuild, to grow stronger and better prepared for the challenges ahead. The swarm had underestimated them. They had made a mistake, thinking that humanity was weak. But now, humanity had learned to fight, and they were ready to face whatever the universe threw at them next. Carter stood tall, his team beside him. They had won. And this victory was only the first step toward a future where humanity could stand strong against the darkest forces in the galaxy. The war had only just begun, but Carter knew one thing for sure: humanity would never surrender.